This was clickbait for me. I took the bait. I took the bait the way that you might think I did. You can see that this is another Fox News article. It says, Dr. Oz reveals do-it-yourself coronavirus vaccine. It's that powerful. And I will admit completely, and this was published yesterday, I took the bait. I looked at this. I was all like, okay, what's, Dr. Oz I kind of take with a grain of salt because he is both a doctor and he plays one on TV. So I kind of I take him with a grain of salt. And I was like, okay, well, what
New Age and alternative medicine. He's known for a lot of New Age and alternative medicine, a lot of questionable advice. So
yeah, I take him with a grain of salt, but I myself fell for this, I fell for it the way they wanted me to. So I was like, okay, well, I don't really trust Dr. Oz, but maybe he's going to give some good advice. Maybe, I know he talks to people. People talk to him, but here it is. So it says, while a vaccine to combat the spread of the coronavirus remains months away from approval, taking the proper precautions at home can reduce virus transmission by nearly 50%, according to Dr. Oz. So what's this 50% answer? So he was on Fox and Friends Sunday, answered many questions surrounding the novel outbreak, emphasizing the importance of hand washing and social distancing. After reports on Sunday estimated the number of infected cases in the U.S. surged nearly 3,000 nationwide, up from less than 500 cases recorded in the country at the start of the week. And what's his answer? Washing your hands alone is probably a 50% reduction in virus transmission, Oz said. It's a do-it-yourself vaccine. It's that powerful. That's the best way to stay out of it. But he emphasized the most important thing is social distancing. So I fell for the clickbait. At least there was a good message there. That is what is being emphasized, hand washing and social distance as being your friends. But I definitely fell for I totally fell for the clickbait completely.
So he's not encouraging you to manufacture your own vaccines at home?
No, he's not. He's not. Okay. Nor is he. What I kind of thought was going to happen was it was going to be like some sort of kind of almost like a home remedy, or maybe he would even kind of explain how you can make, because I've actually seen some posts where people talk about how you can make your own hand sanitizer. Because obviously hand sanitizer is going out the door in most shopping centers now and all that kind of stuff, and people having trouble finding it. But yeah, so anyway, it was clickbait, but I mean, at least it's not a terrible message. At least they are giving some practical advice. It's the same advice you're hearing everywhere else, but I guess they were trying to be clever and get you to click on the article, and it worked. It worked for me. Yeah. Hook, line, and sinker.
Speaking of sanitizer hoarding, did you see those in Tennessee who bought 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer in order to resell them on Amazon?
I did see that, and that they got banned and they can't sell anything. So they're thinking they might just go ahead and donate it.
Yeah, they're donating it to a church. The state attorney general sent them a cease and desist order, so they're not allowed to gouge people for hand sanitizer. Which I guess it's good that it's available, but this is one of those things where there's an opportunity for something good to happen. We could have more hand sanitizer if people were paying more for it. It would run production. But people are gouging, I guess, and to a certain degree I understand, but to a large degree I'm just by the wrong-handedness of that kind of
I don't have any problem with Amazon or eBay saying you can't do this. We're not going to allow you to do this on their platform. I don't have any problem with that. In fact, I fully encourage that. My line is pretty simple. It's when you have government intervention, that's where things become questionable. And that's actually what my segment's going to be a lot about. But yeah, I don't have any problem with Amazon saying you're a jerk, because I would say to him personally, you're a jerk. I would, if it was me, my personal opinion. But just because I have a personal opinion doesn't mean that I believe I should be able to legislate, you know what I mean? Or that I believe that that the police should arrest this man for buying too much hand sanitizer. See what I'm saying? That's the line for me.
And they do have to protect their brand. If they're seen as the place where you get gouged for goods, that hurts Amazon. So I suppose I can see their point.
Yeah, I just want to make that point that from a liberty perspective, I don't think there's anything wrong with a private company saying what can and can't be sold and under what conditions. And saying we're not going to be a part of this. They have every right to do that. Every right.
Well, what is your main story? You mentioned that it's a coronavirus.
Yeah, I'm kind of sticking with the same. I'm gonna beat this horse until it's dead. And quite frankly, I don't think it's going to be dead for a long time. And quite frankly, I do not see a lot of people talking about this. I see a lot of people talking about Corona. I see people talking about Corona like crazy. But I don't see people really getting into the liberty aspect. The coronavirus versus liberty. And we have some big stories that have happened in the last week since we were on the air. Some stories that I think are quite frankly frightening. And I'm not trying to be a fear monger or what people are calling it fear porn. I'm not trying to do fear porn. What I am trying to do is say, take a moment, step back. What are these people doing? Is this a good idea? Is it legal? Is it constitutional? And is it practical? Those are the questions that we're not asking. Is this practical? Can we really do this? When we first started this show, I started talking about this topic right off the bat. And one of the points I tried to make, and one of the ironies I tried to point out, is that China was in a unique position to do what they did. And the reason they're in a unique position is because they have both will and capacity. And what do I mean when I say will and capacity? Well, capacity has to do with their wealth. China is one of the largest economies in the world. By some estimates, it's actually larger than the United States, depending on which metric you use. But it's certainly a rival to the United States in terms of the raw size of their economy. Per capita, it's not anywhere near us, but it is as far as just as an economy by itself, it is huge. Only rivaled by the United States. So they are a wealthy country. So they have capacity. They have the ability to buy things, and not to mention everything's made in China. So they have capacity in that issue, very unique to the rest of the world because they are the world's manufacturing plant right now. So they have that unique position of capacity, meaning they have all that wealth. Now, when I talk about will, and this is very important in the discussions of liberty and to be real and to be realistic, they are a communist country. And they are a despotism. They are an oligarchy. Everybody doesn't get to join the Communist Party. It is an elite group of people. And they are a despotic regime. There are not free elections in China. In fact, one thing that before this show even started, I would have liked to point out is, very quietly, I think about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, the president of China removed the term limits because there had been term limits in China, and he quietly removed them to show that, yes, we are headed towards more of a despotism in China. And nobody commented about that, by the way. Nobody cared. But because of that, the irony is that they are able to do things that no other nation, I think, on earth can do because they don't necessarily have both. There are other nations that have the will. They're despotic. They're tyrannical. They are not free societies. But they don't have the wealth that China has, and they don't have the manufacturing. They don't have all the capacity that they have. They don't have the military and the police forces, and quite frankly, the Communist Party mechanism, because they did implement the Communist Party mechanism in order to enforce these checkpoints. I talked about this before. Basically, what they were doing was the scenario was if you walk out of your apartment building, the local party boss was standing outside. He would check your temperature. You would have probably at least one checkpoint with the police, and then you'd have another checkpoint at the grocery store, and then you'd have to go through it all again. So you'd be checked 6 times. And if anywhere on that chain you tested, you were had a temperature, they grabbed you and they quarantined you. Nobody else could do that. Nobody else could do that. And there are definitely liberty implications there, and it kind of goes to who we are as a people. Who we are as a nation and all that kind of stuff. Do we really believe in freedom? We say live free or die. We say freedom isn't free. We use those platitudes all the time. Do we really believe them? And right now you're kind of seeing maybe we don't. Maybe we don't, because I wanted to bring up the text of the LA order because
this is LA Mayor Eric Garcetti.
Yes, and I've got to find the article. I apologize. I had it set up. I had it set up before, but
while you're
anyway,
finding the gist of it is he is closing down bars and restaurants. Is that right?
that is correct, among other things. Among other things. That's not all of it. And I do want to mention, as we're talking right now, this is also happening in San Francisco, and I couldn't find the text of that order, but San Francisco, as I understand it, is taking it a step further, where they're actually imposing like a curfew. There's also places in New Jersey where they're starting to impose curfews from 8 to 5. Now, this is something that was done in Italy. So I would advise people, go and get as much information on what's happening in Italy, because they are copying Italy. They're copying the Italian model because Italy is a quote unquote democracy. They're trying to see if what they're doing there can be done here. So now the reason I bring up the city of Los Angeles, and the reason I wanted to bring up the actual text, is, first of all, it's everybody else is just going to tell you what he said instead of actually showing you what he said and show you what the quote unquote legal language is. Although my question is this legal? I think that's a valid question. Is this legal? Does this go beyond the authority that he has? But the point is, he's doing it regardless. So this is the city of Los Angeles. This is a public order under City of Los Angeles Emergency Authority. This was issued March 15th, 2020. Subject is new city measures to address COVID-19. Says, on March 4th, 2020, I declared a local emergency in relation to the arrival of COVID-19 virus in our community. And on March 12th, 2020, I ordered a number of measures to be taken across the city to protect members of the public and city workers from undue risk of contracting the COVID-19 virus. Our precautions over the past weeks and what we do over the next few days and weeks will determine how we will weather this emergency. They try to provide you with a little bit of context. They cite the Centers for Disease Control, which a lot of governors and mayors are doing that. I want to point out, I actually like what the Center for Disease Control is doing, because all they're doing is providing advice. They are not using the weight of law. And that, to me, is fine. And I don't have a problem with this, with the Centers for Disease Control recommending that you not have gatherings over 10 people and putting that information out there. What I have a problem with is who gets to decide that. And when governors and mayors decide they're going to give it the rule of law. So it says, here in the city of Los Angeles, we must redouble our efforts to maintain hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, and social distancing. It is absolutely critical that we as a city do everything we can to slow the pace of community spread and avoid unnecessary strain on our medical system. To aid in our efforts, under the emergency authorities vested in my office under the laws of the city of Los Angeles. That's interesting that he's using the laws of the city of Los Angeles, which are city ordinances. That's like the lowest level of law, basically. Today, I am ordering that a series of temporary restrictions be placed on certain establishments throughout our city in which large numbers of people tend to gather and remain in close proximity. By virtue of authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Los Angeles, pursuant to the provisions of the Los Angeles Administrative Code, Chapter 3, Section 8.29, to promulgate, issue, and enforce rules, regulation, orders, and directives, I hereby declare the following orders to be necessary for the protection of life and property, and hereby order, effective at 11:59 p.m. tonight until March 31st, 2020 at 12 p.m. that. Okay. Number one, there's four things. Now, I'll let you comment, Peter. All bars and nightclubs in the city of Los Angeles do not serve food shall be closed to the public. Number two, any bars or nightclubs in the city of Los Angeles that serve food may remain open only for the purposes of continuing to prepare and offer food to customers via delivery, service, or to be picked up. Dine-in food service is prohibited. Number three, all restaurants and retail food facilities in the city of Los Angeles shall be prohibited from serving food for consumption on premises. Restaurants and retail food facilities may continue to operate for purposes of preparing and offering food to customers via delivery service, to be picked up, or for drive-through. For those establishments offering food pickup options, proprietors are directed to establish social distancing practices for those patrons in the queue for pickup. The following are exempt: cafeterias, commissaries, and restaurants located within hospitals, nursing homes, and similar facilities, grocery stores, pharmacies, food banks, Los Angeles World Airport's concessionaries. That's interesting. So you can still go out to eat at the airport if you'd like. Trucks and other vehicles engaged in delivery. Here's an irrelevant one. All movie theaters, live performance venues, bowling alleys, arcades shall be closed. All gyms and fitness centers shall be closed. And then the punishment, any violation, is a misdemeanor with fines not to exceed $1,000. It does say each individual officer should use their discretion in enforcing this order and always keep the intent of the order in mind.
Okay. So first of all, you mentioned that this is a city ordinance, that it's the lowest level of law, and that's partly true. But Arizona, like California, is a home rule state. We both have the Dillon Rule, which means that cities have a lot of autonomy. They are able to operate, for the most part, free of state interference. Now, in Arizona, we've seen examples where the state government has come down on cities to prevent them from passing laws that they find to be overreaching, like the plastic bag bans. You cannot have a plastic bag ban in Arizona because of Warren Peterson. But I'm going to assume that this will go into effect. I hear that New York has a similar policy, that they are not allowing people to get they're not allowing people to eat in restaurants. We're also, you can just imagine the amount of difficulty this is going to cause, because you have these sports teams in Los Angeles. You have the Dodgers, you have the Angels, you have two NFL. The NFL season isn't in season right now, but the LA Lakers, the NBA has been shut down. The LA Clippers. This is going to be a major hit to the Los Angeles economy. And we're also seeing Illinois and Ohio at the state level are pushing similar measures. So what do we do with this? Boy, I think people are afraid, and I understand it. If you are in government right now and you stand against a regulation like this, you are going to see a lot of backlash in November. Let me say that. I think politically,
we have elections in November. We are delaying elections here in Arizona. The primaries are being postponed. The primaries, I believe, were postponed in Ohio. So
I know. I think the presidential preference election is going to go on tomorrow in Arizona.
Last I heard, it was not. So I'll have. Unfortunately, I don't have the article in front of me, but I know Ohio. They were talking about pushing theirs. There's definitely. It happened in Georgia, I believe. Georgia did push back their elections. That already came to pass. So this is going to be a story also that's going to be involved with this, because how far do we go with this? Do we start delaying elections? Because it's happening. It is happening. Like I said, I heard Georgia, and Ohio, and so how far do you let this stuff go? And that's the question. How I've said this before on the show, is people, when their security is threatened, they will give their freedoms away. That's an old saying, and there's a lot of truth to it. And I go back to it. Who are we really as a people and as a nation? Are we a nation of laws, or are we a nation of fear? Or are we a nation that's going to hide under our beds just because people don't do what we want? You have every option as an individual to quarantine. You have an option to stay away from people, and nobody is really going to mess with that. So, and I question, the not only the legality of this, but I question the practicality of it. And you can see it with the little enforcement provision, at the bottom here. Each individual officer should use their discretion. Well, officers always use discretion. Okay, they always try to use discretion in their enforcement.
Right, well, that's window dressing. That doesn't really change the meaning of this order, as you said. They always exercise discretion, but that's just to emphasize, if anybody has a criticism, they can point to it and say, well, it's not going to be quite that draconian. They're going to take it on a case-by-case basis and use their best judgment, and we need to support them in this difficult time. Whether or not this is
what this also comes to is we have a right under the Constitution. We have freedom of assembly. Now, I want to take this kind of one by one. Now, when we come to bars, bars are heavily regulated. Okay, they are very heavily regulated in virtually every state. I mean, there are also counties where you can't have bars. There are dry counties to this day in this country. So bars are very, very heavily regulated, and but they are usually regulated at the state level. I would also note that they're usually regulated at the state level. Most
I don't know about that. If you
bar
go to
licenses,
Texas, okay, but if you go to Texas, yeah,
it's dual. It's dual. It's dual. Okay, so you have not every state. I can't speak for every state, but in most states, for instance, you have a state liquor board, and then you might also have a specific business license for liquor within the city, because cities issue business licenses as well.
Right.
Now, there is some play with that. Okay, so there is some play with these business licenses because liquor is heavily regulated. Okay, whether you believe it should be or not, it is. That's the way, and it's been that way basically since the Constitution was implemented, because we were taxing liquor from the very beginning. So liquor's always been very heavily regulated. So I understand there's a lot of play here. Okay, there's a lot of play here. So they may have the authority to go ahead and say, hey, you know what? You don't do this, we take away your liquor license. You can't operate anymore. I'm fine with that.
And if you have a charter city, that charter kind of creates like a little corporation. And so long as they obey the rules that they have set up, I don't think the state of California has very much say about whether or not Los Angeles does this. I think he probably does absolutely have this power. Whether or not it's being used wisely is a different question. But I don't.
And that's part of it too.
Challenged in court. Yeah,
that's part of it too. The practicality, and are you doing more harm than good? That's another question that has to be asked, and we're not going to know the answer to that question until well after this entire crisis has passed over. But that's always a valid question, and those questions should be asked when these things are happening. They shouldn't just be asked in the back mirror of history. You know what I mean? We talked on an earlier show about the internment of the Japanese, and a lot of people should have been asking more questions about that when it was happening. And very few people were. Very few people in government were. Ironically, by the way, I have always heard that the one person in government who was questioning it was J. Edgar Hoover, ironically. He was the one person telling Roosevelt this was unnecessary, because my G-men can take care of this. You know what I mean? So don't worry about it. But you know that's a black mark on our republic for all of history. You know, it's a black mark on our republic. Now here we go.
Here, of course, is are you endangering others by going into social situations where you could contract the virus? I think if you're trying to look at this from a liberty perspective, that's where you have to. I don't usually like to look at things as balancing acts, but in this case, where you do have a reasonable idea that a lot of people could be in danger, I think that's the argument you would make in court.
Yeah, that's the argument they're going to make, but that doesn't mean that they have the authority to do this. I mean, it's the question. It's the question. I'm not offering you an answer right now. I'm not. I'm asking questions, and I think that's what journalists are supposed to do. I think that's what responsible commentators do. You ask questions, and you ask difficult questions, and you try to get the answers to those questions. Right now, we don't have anybody to ask. We can't sit here with the mayor and ask him these questions, or sit there with one of the city councilmen and ask them how they feel about this. But I want to point out, as I pointed out earlier, these are based on the CDC guidelines, and the CDC guidelines do not have the weight of law. They just don't. It's just not there. The CDC is issuing guidelines, and the cities, individual cities, states are taking these guidelines and then trying to make them into law. They're trying to make them into law. And I don't understand exactly the methodology by which they feel they can do this. And here's the other thing. My segment is, I don't want to go too long with my segment. So I'm going to just leave you with this. And you can comment, Peter, but I'm going to kind of leave you with this thought, okay? There is the doctrine of unintended consequences. I talk about it a lot in my own political philosophy, called the doctrine of unintended consequences. You pass a law and you think it's going to do this, not realizing it's actually going to do that. And it actually creates more problems than it solves. There are already reports that I've seen of the yellow vest protests continuing in France, despite all the lockdown there, because they essentially have martial law in France right now. Essentially, they have martial law. This is, in a sense, martial law. That is the bottom line. And so you have to understand what is martial law? How does it work with under the Constitution? Do states have more latitude than, say, the federal government? I would say they do. I would say that they do. And I would say that cities obviously derive their authority from the state. As you mentioned, they're chartered by the state, therefore they derive their constitutional authority under the state. I do think they have additional leeway, but we have fundamental rights in this country, such as freedom of assembly and freedom of religion. And I do want to just mention the religious provision, because he decided not quite to go there. Because he does say, in addition, I hereby issue guidance to the leaders of the city's houses of worship and urge them in the strongest possible terms to limit gatherings on their premises and to explore and implement ways to practice their respective faiths while observing social distancing practices. So he's going short of saying, I'm going to ban churches, okay?
Right.
But let's not mince words. Let's not mince words.
Struck down in court.
What's that?
That would be struck down in court.
So, but freedom of assembly is right there in the same amendment, okay? Our freedom to assemble and freedom of religion, okay? Freedom of the press, okay? So I am not offering an answer here, okay? I'm offering questions. And I'm asking people, where do your loyalties really lie? Do we believe in things like live free or die? Do we believe freedom isn't free? Are we willing to sacrifice for these things? And also, I want to also point out, I'm not saying that these are bad ideas. I'm not trying to, that's another thing that sometimes people don't understand with liberty. I'm not trying to advocate for you going to a movie theater right now. I'm not trying to advocate for you to go to a nightclub right now. I am not advocating for you to go to a bar right now. I think those are probably stupid things to do, okay? I agree with this idea of social distancing, washing your hands. I wish there were more masks, because the fact of the matter is they would help for people that are infected, but either are not sick yet or will never become sick, because we know that happens. They would help, and the mask hoarders. I mean, I'm almost at the point where I say we should hang them. But what I'm trying to say here is we have to ask questions. We have to ask questions. We can't just blindly follow all this stuff in terms of the authority of law. We can follow whatever guidelines you want as blindly as you want. If they tell you to jump off a bridge, you can go and do it if that's what you want to do. The question is, do you have to force everybody else to do it? That's the question.
Right. Now, last week I asked you what your perfect solution would be, and you mentioned something about federal guidelines, and the CDC has issued guidelines, and now the city of Los Angeles has put that into effect as a city ordinance. Were you talking about different guidelines? You were talking about guidelines for first responders. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what the context when we were talking last week about it. But yeah, I do. Actually, that was one of my concerns. It's still one of my concerns, is the guidelines for first responders and healthcare workers. And the funny thing is, we keep hearing healthcare workers, healthcare workers, healthcare workers. And it's like, well, that's public safety too. Okay, that's part of the mix here, especially when you're talking about enforcing quarantines and enforcing social distances. You need the police. Real quickly, I just wanted to. I want to get more into this because I think it's important to share sources because sometimes what happens is people will just kind of talk out their butt and they don't actually tell you where they're getting some of their information. So I just wanted to share this real quick. Dr. John Campbell is I believe, a British nurse PhD. So he's a nurse teacher and also, as I understand, a practicing nurse. And he was ahead of this issue from the beginning, where he was talking about this issue all the way back in January and trying to warn people. I guarantee you a lot of things I'm saying, Dr. John Campbell would not agree with. And I think that helps my credibility rather than hurts it, because there are things that he's advocating that are, in his words, draconian. But what's really good about Dr. Campbell is he provides a lot of statistics and kind of gives you a really good perspective of where we're at right now. And if you look at his past videos, you can see where we've been, how this progressed. And he's one of the few people that was talking about this issue all the way back in January. So I use him a lot when I'm trying to look at some of the patterns and how big is this threat and what are the issues. You know, one of the big issues, for instance, is testing. And quite frankly, we were behind the curve on testing. And right now, testing really isn't that relevant, because once you have community spread, testing is really not that relevant. Right now, what the CDC is telling you is if you have a cough, you have a fever, and we're talking about a dry cough and a fever, stay home. Don't go to the hospital. Unless you have difficulty breathing, don't go to the hospital. You're just going to get everybody else infected. So we're past that point where testing would have been, widespread testing would have been more helpful, because now it's basically we have community spread. We know we have community spread. So it's time to lock down. And again, I'm not trying to say don't do it. I'm asking the question of the context within the rule of law, and if the things we're doing are going to actually work. And I'll make this prediction. Depending on how long this goes, you will start to see people have home bars. You will start seeing people have Corona parties in their homes. People will get restless. People will do these things, and they will do it in a far less regulated manner than if we put some regulations at the bars, if we had some screening going on, because then you at least have a little bit of control, and then you're going to lose all control. That's my prediction, depending on how long this goes.
Okay.